My son left in a hurry, and I can honestly say I don't blame him one bit. He's gone through a lot in the last couple of hours, and I can only imagine what could be going through his head. Hell, he even left his phone lying on the living room floor. I know I shouldn't have, but I looked through it and I saw this recording still open. I listened to it, and since he was probably planning to post it here anyway, I figured I'd post it, together with the story behind what scared him so much.
Everything you see in a horror movie is basically a lie. When you hear a sound coming from the basement you haven't looked inside in 10 years, you don't go down there. You run up to your room, lock your door, and jump into your bed hoping that the sound was just all a part of your overactive imagination. Well, that's what I did 3 days ago. Shit, I even tried to avoid the kitchen as much as possible since it was right next to the door that led down to the basement. Plus, if I ran into my parents' room and told them I heard a sound coming from the basement, they would laugh at me and tell me how even after 3 years of college, I was still that scared little boy they loved so much. You think I'm joking, but my parents have always talked to me like I was still their little angel. I was the son that never did anything wrong. I loved it when I was younger, but as I started getting older, I quickly realized how toxic it was for me. I'm a 21-year-old guy, but whenever my parents talk to me, they both baby talk me. They still call me their little angel and give me money whenever I ask them. Like I said, I loved it when I was younger, but now that I'm trying to become more independent, I find that it has actually become a problem for me. That is why I never came back home for the first 3 years of college. I ignored their calls and texts begging me to come home. But this summer, I started to feel bad. No matter how much I didn't want to, I still packed my bags and drove the 3 hours to my parents' house for my 5-day visit. The first couple of days were annoying, but I still enjoyed seeing my parents. The first day they took me out shopping for new clothes, and for the first time in a long time, ate a nice home-cooked meal made by my father. The second day was a bit annoying for me because I just honestly wanted to rest, but my mother insisted I get up and go to church with her. I argued that it was Thursday and there wasn't a reason to go to church, but it was a special sermon made by some travel evangelist. Reluctantly, I went with my mother to the 4-hour service while my father stayed behind to clean the house and get our dinner ready. When we came back home, my father was sitting on the couch while watching some TV show about people getting their cars towed. He waved me over and said, "Come on, little man. It's been a while since you sat down next to me and watched TV. Here, I'll make us some popcorn. Would you like that?" I rolled my eyes and walked up to him before saying, "Dad, you really don't have to talk to me like I'm a baby. I'll make the popcorn, just relax." He looked up at me with small tears forming at the corner of his eyes and said, "I know. I just never thought you would grow up. You're my only son, and it really is a hard habit to break. How about this? You stop being a little bitch and man the fuck up, and I'll stop talking to you like the baby you really are." He smiled at me as he finished talking, and I stood in front of him with my mouth opened and shocked by how blunt his statement was. After staring at him for a couple of seconds, I finally got over my shock and gave him a nod before rushing into the kitchen and threw a bag of popcorn in the microwave. While I was waiting for the timer to go off in the microwave, I felt a series of warm air hit the back of my neck. I turned around and saw my father standing within 2 inches of me. He let out a scream and jumped back while he laughed and said, "Oh, come on, little guy. It's just your dad. Here, let me get the popcorn out for you so you don't burn your hands." He shoved me to the right and grabbed the popcorn out of the microwave and walked to the couch. Like I said, the movies are almost always lying when you come across these types of situations. Normally, the dumbass either sits next to his dad and acts like nothing happened. He tries to ease the tension with poorly written jokes and things go back to normal. Or the son beats his dad up and kills him. I mean, plot twist, he's a fucking murderer. I wanted to do the latter, but if I tried to kill my father, he would just overpower me and end up killing me. Angry and somewhat scared, I walked out of the kitchen and went out to my room. I didn't eat dinner with them that day. Hell, that was the last time I ate with either of them. Like I said earlier in the post, I first heard the sound from the basement the night of my 3rd day there. It was around 11 and it sounded like something was being dragged down the floor for a second. I was never one to take chances. I was only here for 3 more days, and I promised myself that this was the last time I ever came back home. Was there something in the house? Probably. Why didn't I call the cops? No matter what my parents did to me, I loved them and I did not want them to go to jail. Why didn't I just leave the house? I didn't want to. It was the only place I could really rest. I didn't have enough to stay at a hotel. Yes, my parents would give me money whenever I asked, but I know for a fact they would be far too sad or pissed to give me money if I walked out in the middle of my visit. Why didn't I check what was in the basement? Because I'm not fucking stupid. The next day, I tried to stay in my room for as long as possible. My parents tried to get me out of the house, but I just told them that I was feeling sick. My mother tried to take care of me throughout the day, but I just told her that I wanted to be left alone. After around the 4th time, she gave up and didn't come back up again. My father passed by my room a couple of times and just stared me down. He mouthed, "pussy" or "bitch." I just avoided looking at him each time he did it, but after the 6th time, I couldn't take it anymore. I closed the door and locked it. I lasted till 10:30 p.m. I tried to stay in the room until tomorrow, but I really had to use the restroom. Reluctantly, I got out of bed and slowly opened my door. The door to my parents' room was locked, and I could hear my dad snoring. Once I was done using the restroom, I quietly walked down to the kitchen to get a glass of water and possibly something to eat. I was shoving as many croissants as I could into my mouth when I heard a shuffling coming from the basement again. It was louder this time. I knew whatever was down there was even closer. I walked up close to the door and put my ear against the door. It sounded like it was still down the stairs, but I couldn't tell for sure. What I did notice was that every couple of seconds, I could hear it let out a grunt. I will admit it, I was definitely curious, but I didn't even know what was down there. I will admit it, I was definitely curious, but I didn't even know what was down there. For all I knew, my parents were housing some serial killer down there. I grabbed another croissant and a glass of water before walking up to my room. I'm going to leave the house today. I knew I had to. This morning, my father pulled me to the side and said, "Don't you fucking come back again. Do you hear me?" I tried to pull his hands off of me, but he said, "Listen, boy, your mother isn't here. She's not fucking right in the head. She loves you so much. She's fucking crazy. I tried to get you to leave. Shit. I tried to make you leave, but you wouldn't. I didn't want you to figure out how crazy your mother has gotten, but I think you should know." He grabbed my right arm and dragged me towards the basement. I tried to push myself off of him, but he was far too strong. When we got up to the door, he took a key out of his pocket, unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and pointed down the stairs. I heard a muffled scream come from downstairs before I could fully register what it was. It was a guy that should have been dead. He had a picture of my face stapled around his face. His mouth was sewed shut and his hands and feet were cut off and rotting away in the corner of the room. I swallowed the vomit that crept up to my mouth and looked up at my father. He sighed before saying, "She missed you, son. I don't know why you avoided us for so long, but it made your mother completely lose it. She had to make herself another son. When I found him lying in the basement the first time, I begged her to get rid of him. I told her we could go for an adoption, but she insisted he was perfect. He was the same height as you the day you left. He had the same color hair as you. I wanted to turn her into the police, but I don't have it in me. I love her. Love her so much. I just need to pack the rest of my shit and get out of this house as soon as I can."
Hello, son. I'm so sorry to do this, but there is no other way to tell this story how it should be told. I always warned you about leaving your phone lying around, and you know what your mother's like. Well, at least you do now. Real love is never what you expect it to be. It's not a wave of emotion or a sudden storm that rocks your life. Love is more like building a house, brick by brick, until one day you share a life together. 25 years of marriage doesn't just build you a house, it builds the foundation of everything in your life. It's the air that you breathe and the food in your belly, and when that foundation starts to rot, you don't just give up, you fix it. No matter the cost. I just want you to understand, son. I know you must think I'm a failure. I listened to your recording. You have to know first that I'll never stop looking out for you. I'm sorry I couldn't find my strength sooner, but thanks to you, I know what I have to do. I need to tell you mine. Don't take this burden on yourself anymore. You won't have to worry about money. Live a wonderful life and grow into the young man me and your mother saw before you left. I'm sorry we babied you through these years. You're our only child. We put you on a pedestal because you were our crowning achievement. The reason for a marriage is to carry on through everything we never told you. The truth is, your mother's been sick for a long time before you left. Of course you couldn't know that. We're not a family that will burden our child with something that important. We just wanted you to have a normal life, and when you didn't have the same sickness as your mother, well, even talking about it made us so afraid of the bad times coming back that we got stuck in a routine. Fake it till you make it. Make your family TV happy and let the hard truths soften until they disappear. I don't honestly know when your mother stopped taking her medication, but it can't have been soon after you left. She became sullen and withdrawn in the first few weeks. It felt like a normal reaction at the time. We were so sad to see our boy leave. Honestly, I felt relief that she was processing things in the right way. Of course, that didn't last. The first signs weren't particularly large red flags at the time, but hindsight is the father of regret. It was your old things that became her first obsession. At first, it was about preserving your room. Then it was about keeping it obsessively clean. Eventually, she started taking things out of your room, clean clothes, sheets, etc., and washing them every couple of days only to put them back. Then she started talking to herself again. I love your mother. It broke my heart to watch her deteriorate again. I kept an eye on her pills. From what I could tell at the time, she was still taking them. I wish I'd done something then. I could have gone the extra mile and made her take them in front of me. I could have checked the trash and seen the discarded pills and confronted her. But that isn't anyone's first move, is it? Those are methods of last resort. Things gradually deteriorated over the next year or so. There was no talking your mother out of her behavior. You know what she's like. Defeated, I threw myself into work so that I could get the time off when you came home and enjoy those brief vacations of peace. So, there I sat, in a pot of warm water, oblivious to the fact that I was about to be boiled alive. Kyle came into our home a few months before we last saw each other. What followed were the worst days of my life. From what I gathered, he was homeless, vulnerable, and an easy target for your mother. She's a kind woman at heart and just needed someone to care for. Please don't be too harsh on her. After all, it's me that should have put my foot down. I should have been a goddamn man and saved that boy. Instead, I've been a deluded idiot. You can imagine how it went. We offered him a meal, a bed for the night. Your mother hadn't smiled in weeks, let alone cooked or cleaned, but suddenly it was like I had my wife back again. How could I have said no when it clearly made her happy? The one night became 2, then 3 nights, then 3 weeks, and in a short time, I was able to convince myself that what was happening was completely normal. That's just what you do, isn't it? You adapt to your surroundings even as it all comes crashing down around you. Kyle was nice enough, I suppose. But I never really got to know him enough to care about him. Not until it was too late. It didn't help that he was terrified of me. I would hear him laughing in the kitchen with your mother as they prepared a meal, only to fall silent when I would enter and put his eyes to the floor. It wasn't dishonest fear. He was a vulnerable young man who had been on the streets for a long time, even at his age. I can't imagine what he went through before he came to us, or why he is so afraid of men. Desperation is all that kept him here. Your mother, of course, never seemed to notice. She would just carry on chatting away as if she'd never been happier, while Kyle and I shared the occasional look of concern. He looked a lot like you. I didn't realize it at first, but when your mother started dressing him, helping him organize his life and such, I began to make the connection. Of course, this was all the calm before the storm. Eventually something had to give. We had a good few weeks, maybe even months of peace. But soon enough, things began to roll downhill. I think the first pebble was the haircut. I remember she had arranged one for him at her salon. I was out in the garden and had just walked in to get a glass of water when I heard her sobbing and poor Kyle in over his head and trying to calm her down. Turns out that he had politely refused to have his hair dyed and cut short like yours. I took her upstairs, made sure she had her pills. After she had calmed down, I put her to bed and went downstairs to speak to Kyle. But he was long gone, the front door swinging in the wind. She should have stayed that way. I don't know how she did it. But somehow, a few days later, Kyle was back in the house. New haircut, new outfit, the works. But something was different. I could tell. It was more than the clothes. He had lost the warmth in his eyes. Something horrible was waiting out there on the streets for him, I was sure of it. Was he being sexually abused? I do have my suspicions, but I don't know anything about living on the streets, so I'll keep them to myself. What I do know is that my wife had forced this kid to make a choice between the devil and the deep blue sea. I'm not sure which we were. After Kyle came back, the atmosphere in the house changed. No more laughter in the kitchen, no more denying the problem. My wife was taking advantage of a desperate, abused young man and was forcing him to do things he didn't want to. There was a part of me that believed that was where it would end. She would have a nice boy around she could pretend was you, and we could adapt to that. We were even keeping a poor young boy off the streets, and we were helping him get on his feet. After things settled down, I would find a way to help her, and everything would work out okay. That part of me pretty much died as the days went on. Things became even worse. It was as if, by not stepping in then, I gave your mother courage, validation almost in what she was doing. I'm an idiot. A weak, useless coward and a pathetic excuse for a man. Letting my wife play with Kyle was like letting a stray dog eat at your table, and just like a stray, she kept demanding more. When she realized I wasn't prepared to step in, poor Kyle began to really suffer. She started hitting him if he didn't play along. She made no attempt to hide the fact she wanted to call him your name. She even made him eat the same food you did. Food he was allergic to and left him in agony. She began to exhibit new patterns, making Kyle hold her hand when they left a room, making him watch children's TV with her, and reliving your youth. I began to observe her during their interactions, and noticed that whenever Kyle spoke, your mother would quickly begin speaking over him. Or if it was necessary for him to speak, she would turn away and close her eyes, her fists balled in an irrational, white-knuckled rage. He learned quickly that the best thing to do was sit in silence and let it happen. Eventually, he would be allowed outside and he could have his respite. God knows how bad it must have been out there for him to keep coming back to us. It didn't take long before things went too far. It only took one step. And then everything came crashing down. I woke up that night in a daze. Must have been about 2 in the morning, which is really unusual for me, because as you know, I sleep like a boulder. So, in uncharted territory as I was, it took me a couple of minutes to register what was happening around me. Eventually, I realized I was alone. The space where my wife had been was empty, replaced now by a chaotic pile of old clothes and torn sheets. It was too dark still to make anything out, so I heard the sound first, a low muttering from the corner of the room. I bolted into a sitting position, staring in the direction of the whispers into a sheet of blackness as my eyes slowly adjusted to the absence of light. Eventually, the features of the room came into focus and I saw your mother. She was kneeling in the corner of our room behind a curtain. From the bed, I was only able to make out her feet. The rest of her body formed a silhouette against the fabric that clung to her skin. The sounds from behind the curtains grew louder, and I began to make out the words between muffled screeching and breathless sounds of now familiar irrational rage. His fucking voice. Better shut his fucking mouth. He doesn't sound the same anymore. He's my fucking child. He better sound the same as my fucking child. I crept closer, not trying to be quiet or anything, but she was oblivious. She kept repeating herself over and over, completely unaware that I was inches away. She began pounding at the wall, rocking back and forth with increasing abandon, until finally I shook myself from my trance and called out to her. Then she was on her feet, yowling like a cat, all claws and shrieking fury. She came at me without warning, or clothes, or anything resembling the woman I fell in love with, that saved me from myself so many years ago. I held her back as much as I could. I guess it was just a few scratches and bruises in the end. What hurt most was the paranoia. She was so vicious, so scathing in a way I had never seen her before. She was convinced it was my fault she was like this. That it was my fault you went to college. I feel disgusting that I left your mother alone all those times. I should have quit my job, found a way to work from home. She was right, really. I owed it to her. I abandoned her when she needed me, and I encouraged her only son, her only reason to get better, to leave us and build a new life where you wouldn't need her anymore. So even when she eventually gave in to her exhaustion and collapsed on the floor, as I stood there bruised and battered, my own tears mixed with the blood that stained the sheets, I felt more than ever that I would stand by her. Idiot. Stupid, weak, cowardly failure. I have failed my family in every possible way. I was understanding when I needed to be a man, and when I should have been understanding, I was too busy being a blind idiot to the damage I was causing. Don't blame your mother for what happened next. She is sick. She has always been sick. This is all my fault, and certainly not yours. I bandaged myself up, piled the broken furniture in the room, and took your mother to bed. By the time we were all finished, the sun was almost up, and it was time for me to get in the shower and head to work. That whole day went by like a blur. I don't really remember much, actually. I don't remember driving home, walking up to the front door. I just remember going for the handle and it being warm, really warm. The oddness of the sensation glued me in place. Staring at our front door and absorbing every detail. It was a strange moment, where the stress and the grief almost got the better of me. I couldn't honestly tell you how long I stood there, but at some point, the door opened, and beyond stood a woman that used to be my wife, your mother. She looked the same, but was now completely unrecognizable. And she was smiling. Her clothes were torn in places, her face looked bruised, and it looked like someone had torn out a clump of her hair. My first reaction should have been concern. Instead, I reacted with the same numb acceptance that I show towards everything these days. She grabbed my arm and pulled me further into the house, giggling with delight as she led me down the hall to the door of our basement. You know what happened next. That poor boy. That poor, stupid, desperate boy. I remember standing there, your mother cooing by the boy's side and stroking his hair while he tried to scream. The smell of blood and bleach flooded the room, forcing its way into my nostrils and scraping itself along my tongue. Making sure I couldn't ignore the scene laid out before me. I was too numb for reaction, too numb for screaming or for protesting when she made me clean up, too numb to stop anything. I was in a nightmare, watching myself clean up after your mother. When I arrived, he still had legs. When I left that night, she took them as well. I didn't truly seem real until the second, until I read your story either. I helped my wife mutilate and torture a young man, then watched as she stapled a picture of your face to his. I think I might have even tried to convince her it wasn't you, to somehow stop the madness. Then there was another fight. Your mother was ready for it, and my skull can only take so much abuse. Eventually I woke up, concussed but alive, quickly realizing that contradicting my wife's new view of the world was no longer an option. Then you came home. Luckily, we'd had time to prepare. Even your mother could see that we had to keep you separated from what was happening, and it became time to play happy families again. I was so desperate for things to work out, to go back to how they used to be, that I almost believed my own lies. Almost. I'm relieved to write this next part. The way we left things, the things I said, I hope you know now how much they've tormented me. But please, allow me to explain. The first time, when we were talking by the microwave, I'm sorry, son, I was never talking to you. You're a brave, intelligent, wonderful person, and I'm so proud of you. It just kind of slipped out. Sat there in the filth of my own cowardice, pretending everything was okay. I felt like the whole world was closing in on me, and it all just came out without me meaning to. I was talking to myself the whole time, and you have to understand that. In a way. Though I'm not sorry, because it finally gave me the courage to do one thing right. I had to get you out of there. But damn you, son. You're just too good a kid. I'd like to say I did a good job, taking at least some of the credit, but chances are you'd have landed on your feet no matter who was your dad. I know you don't understand it yet, but you will when you have kids of your own. I would love to have seen them. I really believed it would be enough. In a way, I wanted it to be. Because it was the first time in such a long period that I had been given the chance to express the truth and do something good. I really believed it would be enough. In a way, I wanted it to be. Because it was the first time in a long time that I had been given the chance to express the truth and do something good all at the same time. So yeah. I guess I did enjoy trying to freak you out there. But you're just too damn loyal. You gave me no choice. I just wanted one last time to protect you from the world, but I failed that as well. I remember your face after you saw the truth. I knew then that I'd lost you. Then you got in your car and drove off, and I stood in the doorway with one hand on your mother's back. And in the other, I held a knife. You know something? Right at the second, I feel the best that I have in a long time. I've wanted to tell this story for so long, to explain myself. I know I won't get any forgiveness. Not from the law, not from the world, not from you. But one day, you will realize that on some sick level, love and madness are much the same things. But now I'm sick of the smell of petrol, and the screams of this young man. You've given me courage, son. And now it's time for me to use it.